Anything.
Yes, very sorry about it. Good morning, everyone. We are gathered here today virtually to discuss a very important topic about digital payments and electronic signatures, because digital systems play an important role to help businesses function effectively and efficiently within the current environment. So I can't think of a better time to have a webinar like this, which will provide us information about the current digital facilities already available uh, to help businesses function effectively within this restrictive environment, and also the legal and security features, security features that are in place to facilitate such transactions, and what gaps we have to address going forward to fast track this much delayed transition from manual processes to digital processes in Sri Lanka. So without taking much of your time, I think we have a great lineup of speakers, and we have quite a number of speakers as well. So to make the best use of available limited time, I would like to first invite the General Manager and the Chief Executive Officer of Lanka Clear, Chana De Silva, to make his presentation on progress Sri Lanka has made so far in facilitating digital payments and acceptance of electronic signatures. Over to you, Chana.
Thank you, Subhashini. Thank you, Chamber, for inviting me. Without taking much time, let me just jump into my presentation. Can you guys see the presentation?
Yes, Chana.
Yes, Chana. Yes, can do.
Okay. Right. So in terms of the progress of digital payments and electronic signatures, I think we need to look at the context of what we are discussing. So let me just give you a brief use case of Thailand and compare that with Sri Lanka, just to get a context right. Now, these are actually the number should be January 2020. There's a typo in there. In Thailand, if you really look at the growth, if you look at the bottom left-hand corner, which is the numbers that recorded in 2013 to 2014, during 2014, there was 76.5% of the mobile handsets that were sold were smartphones. And if you really look at the bottom left-hand corner, what has done to the banking and the transaction industry, from 2013 to 2014, the growth of enrolled bank accounts grew by 517%. Transaction volume grew by 214%. And value grew by 208%. This was year on year. And if you really look at the demographic of Thailand in 2020 January, 70 million population of the country, and it has 134% mobile phone penetration in the country. And 75% of that population use internet. And interestingly, 75%, 52 million access social media using mobile devices. So when you compare that with, so what it has done is actually, because of that, by 2019, end of 2019, I don't have 2020 statistics, 74% of the banking services were accessed via mobile devices, where the global access rate was only 41%. So come to Sri Lanka, January 2020, same comparison, we have a 22 million, Thailand has about 3.5 times the population of Sri Lanka. Then we have 149% mobile phone penetration, which is actually even higher than Thailand. And then we have 47% internet users. Interestingly, we have 30% of the users who are using social media via mobile devices, which is like 6.4 million users. And again, few statistics from the payments industry, 80% of the cash withdrawals are below 10,000 rupees from ATMs. And point of sales transactions where cash transactions happening rather than the electronic is more than 90%. And by regional estimates, cash costs the country almost 1.5% of GDP. And actually, I don't have the 2019 figure because it's still not published. The education spend for Sri Lanka in 2018 was 2.1% of the GDP, and compare this to 1.5% we used to print, distribute, provide security, recycle, print, all these actions, we spend 1.5% of GDP. So if we can create a dent, we are going to save this GDP into whether it's social welfare programs or anything. But if you go back just to Thailand, out of 70 million population, 50% are urban. If you look at the first bullet point in the first point in the table, then if you look at Sri Lanka, out of 21.37 million, only 18% are urban. So which means almost 82% are rural. So if we are to penetrate, we have to go rural. The second one I want to talk about is the current generation, which is roughly what we call the Generation Z, which is people who are born between 1995 and 2012, roughly, can vary a year or two. But if you look at that generation, they have only average 8 seconds of attention span. And 25% of them use mobile phones almost 10 hours a day. And 40% of them make purchases on their phones at least once a week. These are global statistics. And 55% has made a purchase because of a content shared by an influencer, maybe a rock group, BTS, I don't know, whoever, right? And 60% tend to favor brands that offer free shipping, obviously online and free shipping.
4 years ago, we started to wonder, what would shopping look like if you could walk into a store, grab what you want, and just go? What if we could weave the most advanced machine learning, computer vision, and AI into the very fabric of a store so you never have to wait in line? No lines, no checkouts, no registers. Welcome to Amazon Go. Use the Amazon Go app to enter. Then put away your phone and start shopping. It's really that simple. Take whatever you like. Anything you pick up is automatically added to your virtual cart. If you change your mind about that cupcake, just put it back. Our technology will update your virtual cart automatically. So how does it work? We used computer vision, deep learning algorithms, and sensor fusion, much like you'd find in self-driving cars. We call it Just Walk Out technology. Once you've got everything you want, you can just go. When you leave, our Just Walk Out technology adds up your virtual cart and charges your Amazon account. Your receipt is sent straight to the app, and you can keep going. Amazon Go. No lines, no checkout. No, seriously.
So that's the vision we have for people in this country. So with that in mind, and with the statistics that I put out, I will cover some other initiatives that we have taken together with central bank. One of the things that payments have to be seamless, as you saw in the previous video. What we looked at was more than the majority of the transactions, 90% or more of our retail transaction at very low values. That's where the cash is highly used. So we launched something called Just Pay. It's a very simple payment mode. It enables the customer to use their bank account rather than a card or any other instrument to make a payment from their account to a merchant's account. And one of the other problems that we identified was the commission that is charged from a merchant was fairly high in rest of the payment modes, 2 to 3% in some cases. So in this payment mode, we brought it down to less than 1% for most transactions. Almost all most transactions, it's less than 1%. And minimum per transaction value of 25,000. So there's a cap of 25,000 maximum per transaction value is 25,000. Then all the mobile payment applications that are connected has to follow the central bank security guidelines. And also you need to have activated your SMS alerts so that when you do a transaction, you get alerted for the value and the time and date and all those of the transaction. So those are the sort of ground rules in that. And we are happy to announce that we have already 15 apps which are operated by banks, financial companies, telcos in operation using this payment mode, which is basically using your current account and savings account to make payments. We call it Just Pay network. So you just click your button and pay. And so any of the users who have a bank account can register with these applications. And there are 15 banks whose customers can use this service, what we call Just Pay, and use any of those previously listed applications. So any customer, so what we have seen in terms of the numbers, in Sri Lanka, we have issued 23 million debit cards from the banks. So which means there are definitely more than 23 million bank accounts in the country. Some may be dormant. My estimate is there's more than 30 million because there are certain banks who have not issued cards. So more than probably 30 million bank accounts. How many of them are active? We don't have the exact statistics, but it's a large number. So any of those customers who have accounts with these banks can use this service. This is just a snapshot of the last 4 months. I just want to bring in a perspective. We have actually seen the transaction registration of customers using these apps has grown more than 200% from Jan to April. And the transaction volumes have grown by 100% throughout these 4 months. And last month in April, we did almost 1 billion rupees worth of transaction. And the interesting part is the value of a transaction is below 2,000, average value of a transaction is below 2,500 rupees. And almost actually more than 2.8 billion worth of transaction within the first 4 months of the year. And these are very low value transactions. Sorry, the presentation went off. Let me just reload it again.
I can see at my end.
Okay. Can you see it now?
Yes,
Yes, it's fine. Yes, it's fine.
Okay. All right. The next one I want to talk about is how was this enabled? We are using a digital certificate. We are issuing it to the device at the time of registration in real time, a digital certificate. What is this digital certificate used for? Actually, when you register, you sign a digital mandate in real time with the acquiring bank or the financial company that you sign up, the app belongs to. And in real time, you sign a mandate giving authorization for a debit transfer. That is what is being used. So I'll jump into digital signatures because this is related. So what is a digital signature? It's basically a file that identifies an individual or an institution seeking access to digital information or providing digital information.
Channa,
yes.
May disturb you. I think the presentation is moving.
I'm sorry?
Presentation is not stuck.
Okay, hold on. Let me reload that. Yeah, okay, hold on. I'll stop sharing. Then I'll reshare the presentation. Is it visible now?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Hold on. Oh, it went back again. Hold on. I'm sorry, the technical difficulty. All right. Is it okay now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So I'll just quickly run through digital certificates. So there are different types of certificates. What does a digital certificate mean? It actually means you are using a credential of your own. Whether it's for a document signing, you can have mobile certificates, as I explained previously. You can have server certificates, which is we call SSL, and you can have certain application level certificates. So what does it do? It basically shows your authenticity, who you are, as well as that you are the authorized person to use this service, as well as a document that is signed. So how does the authenticity is verified of the certificate that is issued? Actually, it's by the certificate authority or the CSP, right? So LankaSign is a certificate service provider that has been in operation since 2009, which started as providing digital certificates to the banking sector and the finance sector. Now it has grown into many areas. I will cover who's using that. So the whole idea is it's like the JP model, JP validating your birth certificate, the identity card photocopy to somebody. The CSP is validating the authenticity of this certificate and the user. So that is what the role of the CSP is. So the receiver will trust this certificate because it's validated by the certificate authority. So there's a process that is in the LankaSign, Central Bank, ICT and SLCERT got involved in setting this up. And they administered what's called the root key signing ceremony, which is the process that is validated to ensure the security. And the process that is used to issue a certificate is certified under ISO 27001 2013 certification. And the operational environment is payment card industry data security services, data security standard certified with military grade encryption, devices used, and the certificate is directly copied onto a token, which is a secure token. So entire end-to-end process is secure. If you look at the adoption of these certificates, there are more than 45 financial institutes already used. So all of you are using, if you are sending a payment transfer, whether it's a check payment or a electronic payment using getting your salaries, all those are digitally signed in the backend. Then the chamber is using digital certificates with almost 150 of their members to share documents using digital certificates. We have already issued almost 180,000 mobile certificates to digital phones, mobile phones to use the initial mobile payment mode that I have introduced. Then Sri Lanka Customs issued almost 240 members. We have issued 240 certificates. There was an issue with the customs of usage of it. There was a question on this. The issue was internal to customs. I believe now it has been sorted. So hopefully that will be in operation, sending documents from now on. And Central Depository System of Colombo Stock Exchange is also using digital certificates. So there's a vast adoption of this. In terms of the mobile payment, digital, as I said initially, digital consent is signed by the bank. The customer is authorizing the bank to make that payment on behalf of him. And for that, we use a digital certificate that is issued to the device. And the customer who's giving the authorization is liable for that transaction. Now coming on to the next one, which is of very much interest to the traders, there's also another operational platform called LankaPay online payment platform, which the platform is not visible to you, but I'll just take a simple example. You can now make payments to customs department using your internet banking or mobile banking or any other application, and you make a payment from your account to customs account. And this is facilitated via this platform. You can use your internet banking, mobile banking, ATM or over the counter, whatever the facility that is provided by your bank, and it's 24/7 and 365 days operational. It provides the participant a confirmation of a receipt number from the department with its customs, and the reports are also provided to each department for the transactions. And these are already Sri Lanka Customs and BOI is providing this online facility through internet banking and other channels. Inland Revenue Department we have already implemented the solution. There are two banks also, we are about to go live, but they have already provided payments to Inland Revenue through a credit transfer using your internet banking. That facility is already provided. So EPF, ETF already being in the progress, LECO, SLPA, CICT, SAGT, Department of Motor Traffic, Sri Lanka Standard Institutes, local government authorities such as the municipal councils. So all these are currently in progress of development. And the banks on the right-hand side already connected to this platform. So any of the customers of these banks can use this service via the facilities that are provided by their bank. Then two more things that I want to touch on. Actually, one of the areas is also popularizing payments is individual peer-to-peer, person-to-person payments. So we have introduced a mechanism called payment exchange name, short PEN, which is similar to the initiative that is happening in India called UPI. In India, in February 2020, there were 1.32 billion volume of transaction with a value of Indian rupees 2.22 trillion happening in February alone using this mode, UPI mode, across 141 banks. What is actually, it's a very simple mechanism. If I want to send money to somebody, the banks or the authority assigns a nickname for the user's mobile, relevant mobile device. Bank account. The bank account, a nickname is assigned. So if I want to send some money to somebody, all I need to know is that person's mobile number and the relevant nickname. I don't need to know his bank, account number, any other credentials. So the receiver doesn't need to disclose any of his banking credentials, which can subsequently use for abuse or frauds. So this is a way out of that. You don't need to divulge credentials, and it eliminates real-time fund transfer to incorrect accounts as well, because it has to match the nickname and the mobile number. And actually there is a reduced customer fee that is provided. So what we feel is, in other countries there is Venmo and there is PayPal and other things where people use peer-to-peer, person-to-person. This mode is available. Already 2 banks are on board. We will be launching it very soon. Then Central Bank launched the standard for Lanka QR code. It's a very simple mode at the merchant. Most of the cases, what happens is, even if you have a card, merchant does not have a POS terminal. So Central Bank launched what's called the Lanka QR, which is basically, it can be on a sticker on a wall, or even just on a wall. If you have a smartphone, you just scan the QR code. It will provide you the merchant details, and whatever the application that you have, you can just make a payment based on that information that you capture. And you don't need any technology requirement at the merchant. All you need is a sticker of a Lanka QR code. And these are interoperable, so any app can scan and pay to any merchant of any bank. So which is the facilities that are provided through Lanka QR. And fee structure is reduced in this as well. Finally, I just want to touch on a new service that we are about to introduce, what we call request to pay. Now, when you get your mobile bill, you just get an SMS every month saying this is the amount that you need to pay. You do nothing with that. But in the future, you will get a mobile where you click on that mobile, and your mobile app, whatever you have, will be open, and you will be able to just click and pay. So it's very simple. That a user has to do is, if I want to send money to somebody, if I want to make a payment request to somebody, all I need to do is, I need to introduce my input my mobile number. I can get my nickname. Then I create a message through the system, which is what we call the RTP service. And then I just send it via SMS, Viber, or WhatsApp, or whatever to the receiver. Once the receiver gets the message, the receiver can click on the message. It'll open up the app he or she has. And whether it's mobile banking, internet banking, then just the information is inputted, nothing to enter. You just click to pay if you agree. So all the mobile companies, the utility companies actually can start using, including individuals. A mason bars can request a payment from the receiver. So these are some of the new things that we have introduced. And I'll just want to conclude the presentation. I'll get into questions if there are questions subsequently during Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Chanda, for that very information. I think during your presentation itself, can you mute your? Oh, yeah, thank you. So I think even during the presentation, there were questions about the legality of these devices and the legal framework. That is an important question that comes to the mind of the people who want to shift from the manual processors to digital processors. And I think we have next in line a speaker who will be able to explain the existing legal framework around these digital transactions, because Sri Lanka passed the Electronic Transactions Act quite some time ago in 2006 to create the necessary legislation enabling the country to make use of the digital technology and facilitate acceptance of electronic signatures, electronic payments. So we have with us today Jayantha Fernando, Director, Legal Advisor of ICT Agency, I think who has been involved in this process from the beginning, who will now tell the audience about the legal aspects of electronic signatures. Over to you, Jayantha.
Thank you, Subhashini. Can I be heard?
Yes, very well.
So I thank you very much, Subhashini, for moderating this session again. You have been a stalwart in promoting digital transactions and adoption of electronic signatures for many years. To begin with, I thank the Ceylon Chamber and all related organizations that took steps to organize this webinar, mainly because I see this as a very good opportunity. Despite the tragedies surrounding or the distressing news surrounding us, I see no better opportunity than this moment to fully operationalize and implement the Electronic Transactions Act. I say this for the following reason. The Electronic Transactions Act, as mentioned by Subhashini, has been there for a while. It's a facilitating instrument. It's an enabling law. One should not look at the Electronic Transactions Act as an impediment or an inhibitor and say that law is a problem. So let me explain a little bit of background to the Electronic Transactions Act and its key features in relation to today's discussion. I have about 5 minutes, and thereafter we will do Q&A and clarify more if needed. So to be brief, the Electronic Transactions Act of Sri Lanka was founded on an international standard known as the UNCITRAL Electronic Commerce Model Law, as well as the United Nations Convention on Electronic Communications that has been adopted as a global gold standard for electronic transactions to ensure interoperability between countries when you have digital transactions communicated from one country to another. So Sri Lanka was one of the first movers in adopting that gold standard known as the UN Electronic Communications Convention, and therefore we are one of the few countries in the Asia Pacific region to upgrade the Electronic Transactions Act in 2017 to incorporate more clearly the provisions of that international gold standard and adopt it domestically so that domestic consumers, traders, importers, exporters, as well as government and citizens at large would benefit from internationally benchmarked set of standards and use it not only for Sri Lanka, but use the documentation digitally created for international transactions as well. And that is the moot point to remember when we discuss the upgraded Electronic Transactions Act amended by Act number 25 of 2017. Now, having said that, there are some key features which you should take note of. Number one is the fact that the Electronic Transactions Act has an enabling kind of legal jargon. It is a law to recognize and facilitate the formation of electronic contracts, as well as creation and exchange of certain classes of legal instruments called data messages, electronic documents, electronic records, and communications. All these four instruments, electronic instruments, have been defined in the law based on international standards, and it is drafted in such a simplistic form for laymen to understand. We will discuss, if anybody wants a clarification of those details, we can discuss them later, but available to be downloaded. If you download the Electronic Transactions Act and look at the definitions, you will find the illustrations and definitions for those four legal instruments. Now, having said that, let's move on to a key provision in the law, section 3, which says that no data message, electronic document, electronic record, or other communication shall be denied legal recognition, effect, validity, or enforceability purely on the ground that it is in electronic form. So the important benchmark to remember in section 3 is that if any objection is taken in a court, tribunal, or any proceeding, that a document that is submitted is in electronic form, so therefore bring the paper, then you can inform the court. Look here, section 3 says that data message, electronic document, electronic record, and a communication shall not be denied legal effect, validity, or enforceability merely on the ground that it's in electronic form. So therefore, the electronic form by default becomes acceptable to courts. That's a third point I want to emphasize. Fourthly, there is a section here, two important sections related to today's discussion. And
Jayanta, excuse me, Mrs. Subhashini. So I think there are some participants who are finding it difficult to hear you. If you can speak a little bit louder. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Can you hear now better?
Yes, I think it is better. Thank you.
I hope so. Anyway, what I want to emphasize is that after today's session, last week I did a presentation for FITIS in a similar session of this nature. I will share with everybody the PowerPoint slides I did so that Ceylon Chamber can circulate it widely for any Q&A later on. But important point to remember in today's context, in the context of today's discussion, is that section 4 and 7. So section 4 says, where there is a requirement for a manual writing imposed by law, notwithstanding whatever is stated in any law, by default, the electronic transactions override any law, and it says that the electronic equivalent of a writing is possible. Now, that is possible. The law says it is possible, provided that that electronically generated document that is equivalent to a writing has to be available for subsequent reference and not lost somewhere in some cloud or somewhere. Even if you are storing in a cloud, it has to be archived, stored, and maintained with security controls and procedures in a proper manner. That is an important point in section 4. Then we come to section 7, which says that which talks about the electronic equivalent of a signature. So wherever in a law there is a requirement for a signature, that requirement is satisfied if a electronic signature is used. And electronic signature definition was upgraded in 2017 to meet the international standards. And the section 7 is very clear that any passcode, PIN, internally generated signature through a device, and of course that is for in very close trusted kind of transactions. But when you want to do contract signing or high value trading and transactions, it is recommended that one should go for a digital signing methodology. So all these various categories of digitally signing, electronically signing, even with a electronic pen on a digital device, all those means that identifies a person with a transaction or a communication is legally accepted. Now, finally, having said all this, two just concluding thoughts I just want to mention. In section 21 of the Electronic Transactions Act, there's a clear provision that defines admissibility criteria. Basically, under the Electronic Transactions Act, admissibility is easier than in traditional law. So I would encourage people to use digital transactions documents for a number of reasons, and conclude by saying that there are, in recent times, I think there was a question about case law. In recent times, in 2013 as well as 2016 and 18, there were cases in the Court of Appeal where the Electronic Transactions Act has been interpreted in the broadest possible way, including in an instance where the TIN number issued by the tax revenue authorities was recognized as an electronic signature in a judgment delivered by Justice Surasena in a tax matter that went up in appeal, and an objection was raised whether electronic generated PIN number would constitute an electronic signature, whether it could be accompanied by a handwritten document. The court said no. Electronic Transactions Act is very clear on that. So in conclusion, what I want to mention is that the Electronic Transactions Act in recent times has been given broad interpretation, and now we have cases which have impact that will ensure that you and I can get involved in digital transactions in a more effective and a meaningful manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shant. I know it's not easy to explain a topic like that in within 5 minutes, but thank you very much for keeping to time. And next, we would like to talk about how digital processes can facilitate financial transactions, because ability to do your financial transactions digitally becomes critical for businesses to function effectively at a time like this. So today we have several speakers representing different financial institutions who will share with us what their institutions are doing to facilitate digital payments and help businesses function effectively today. So first, I would like to invite Tilak Piyadigama, Chief Executive Officer of SDB Bank, to share with us the digital payment facilities provided by SDB Bank. Over to you, Tilak.
Thank you. Hi, good morning, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank for having me here. So I'll get into the job straight away. If you look at digital landscape in Sri Lanka today, we have 21 million population. We have about 28 million mobile phones and connections. So that is about 149% density of mobile connections. So we have an internet penetration about almost 49%. I would say half of our population got internet as well. So I think when you look at this carefully, I would say we are a blessed nation in terms of having such great technology infrastructure in a developing country. But have we used them to its potential? We are still long way to go. So let me give you some stats. Sri Lanka financial inclusion factors, like about 34% people got bank accounts. Talking about digital, only about, I would say about 3 to 4% have got into a mobile app or payment system digitally. I think that's a bit of a concern. But having said that, I remember looking at the same stats 2 years ago. It was the growth from 2 years ago to now, it's about 300%. That means, we are growing. So probably Thailand story, which Channa mentioned, we would replicate pretty soon. And in fact, good thing about digital is when it starts growing, it actually grows exponential. It's not a straight line. It's an exponential growth. All we have seen in every part of the world. So there is one thing which I'm noticing, which maybe I think maybe when the institution like Chamber can address. Sri Lanka has 52% female population and 48 of male. But when you look at the digital payment usage, it's almost 80-20. The male population are 80% of the usage and 20% are females, but we have 52% of female population. I think there's something that we need to do to get them attracted to digital, and so then I think our usage will go up quite incredibly high. So with digital infrastructure in place, we also have seen check usage in Sri Lanka is going down about 10% value and volume over the last 1 to 2 years. So which is actually a good indication of how digital is working in Sri Lanka. So that's basically the background of Sri Lanka in general. But if you talk about SDB particularly, so we are a bank largely focused on rural areas of Sri Lanka, and we got 94 branches, predominantly out of Colombo. So we launched recently a few digital initiatives for those customers. So we have a mobile banking app for like any other bank for our own customers. Then we launched UPay, which Channa mentioned earlier. So UPay is connected with all the banks in Sri Lanka who are participants of JustPay. So meaning anyone who sign up to UPay, be it SDB customer, be it another bank customer, they can do transactions. So transactions are nothing but your bill payments, like you can pay your dialogue bill, Mobitel bill, SLT bill, your insurance payments, your finance, the leasing payments, and so on. So at the same time, you also have Lanka QR-based or QR-based payments at merchant points, right? And so when we started our app, we had our own QR standards. Now we are migrating towards Lanka QR. What it means is we can scan a QR code of any bank, be it commercial bank, be it HNB, be it LOLC. So I think that will give you more access to digital payments. Now, we also know that Sri Lanka has about 2 million credit cards, about 23 million debit cards, but the usage of them have been quite, I think, on the low side. Now again, I think maybe we had the cards, but I think we never, I think, pushed the digital as a national initiative. But I think now it's happening. Probably I think COVID-19 also gave us, I think, major boost. We saw digital transaction growing around 100 to 1% last few months. So Sri Lanka, again, I think, look at, Chanda mentioned this again, I think the usage of cash. So we have 650 billion rupees in transit at given quarter, which is huge. I think if we can bring that back, say 10% out of that to back to the digital systems or banking system, we have a huge economic value. But that requires a lot of work at rural sector, because 80% of Sri Lankans are still in rural areas, 20% are urban. So banks like us, I think, play a major role in terms of doing this. But of course, it's not as simple as we think, because these are behavioral changes. It's not only digital. I think somewhere you have to change the behavior of people, and also we have to establish trust. I think someone asked about security and so on. I think I like to confirm that all our apps built around all financial institutions, not only STB Bank, are meeting international standards and also standards maintained by Central Bank of Sri Lanka, so that it's fully secure. So we have to go through this journey. I think then we'll have more and more customers joining us. I mean, we can see there's growth every day. There are hundreds of customers, thousands of customers joining to do digital transactions. So I think we are looking forward to that. So the good thing about Sri Lanka, as I said, we have a huge penetration of mobile phones and the connectivity and internet, and that will give us this boost. I think that's all I have to say at this point. And if there are any questions, I can take it, specific questions on how we do what we do later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tilak, for that information. And yes, I think we are far away from, in comparison to most other countries in our region, in terms of shifting to digital payments. But as you said, maybe this crisis does offer an opportunity to fast track that delayed process. And I like the optimistic note you ended with, that we will see this, we will catch up fast. And so
Even I like that one more point. I think payment, if you take a journey of a customer, if you take a purchase, it's not only the payment what matters. The entire journey should be, I think, in place. I think what we saw during COVID-19 was, I think, logistics sector got their act together. So as a result, in the whole end-to-end journey was we will meet that requirement of customer. I think that helped as well. So I think we have to develop not only payments at other sectors as well. Thank you.
Yes, that is true. And also, when you are left with less options, you are willing to try out new things a lot more than at other times. So I think, like you said, one of the reasons why most of us hesitate to get onto digital payments and digital transactions is our concerns around safety and security of these systems. So we have with us a speaker. Our next speaker will be able to hopefully address some of those concerns. We have with us Professor Gihan Dias, Vice Chairman of the Federation of Information Technology Industry, Sri Lanka, to speak about security and assurance of digital processes. I would like to invite Gihan for you to share your views on the matter. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Subhashini. Hopefully you can see my screen as well. Is it visible?
Yes, it is.
Okay, right. So I will try to do this. I will definitely do this in 5 minutes. So we are looking at security and assurance. I'm going to go a bit beyond just electronic payments or whatever, but look at digital processes. So what are actually digital processes? Currently, we have manual processes, right? And now we would like to move from manual to digital. So where everything is on paper currently, and we want to move to a situation where everything is digital. Of course, we may in the meantime have partly digital and partly manual and so on, but overall, that's what we're looking at. So, oops, sorry. Okay, right. So from the manual process, the first stage is to run digital processes in the office. And I think many of us are doing that. And in that case, we know who's in the office. We know that who is connected to what computer, and everything is inside our firewall. Everything can be done very securely. Now, today, in the last month and a half, we've got to this work from home mode where people are not to be seen, they're at home and we don't know what computer they are using, so many issues. And now we also need, as I think Tilak also mentioned, to move into where we are talking with various partners, suppliers, customers, governments, banks, and do everything digitally. So that's what we are trying to do. And of course, then the problem is, what about security? So I'm going to look at 4 things very quickly since we are short of time. Email. Now, why do we use email? Some people say, oh, forget about email. It's old fashioned. It's, out of date. Yes, but it is universal. You can talk to anybody on email, but there are many problems. One is it's very easy to forge an email. It can be done in 5 minutes. Of course, there are ways of preventing or slightly reducing that. And also you can intercept and modify email. So there is something called S-MIME secure email. Again, I won't go into details how to protect ourselves. So when you get an email, the questions you need to ask are, who sent this message? Is it the person whose name is appearing there? Quite possibly not. Right? It's trivial to send a message with a known person's name. Right? So just because you recognize the name, don't think it came from the person you thought it is. Has it been changed? In the middle, has it been changed? And later on, if you do something, let's say you get a message saying, oh, transfer 100 million rupees to this account. And then later on, once you did that, the guy says, no, I never sent such a message. Can you prove that I sent it? So that is called non-repudiation. Then passwords. This is for online services like e-banking and all the other things where we typically log into a web site. Today, we still use passwords. Passwords are, I would say, very bad. They're easy to guess. They can be stored insecurely. So one of the things we should move when we are doing these things is not just for the e-signatures, but for everything else, use hardware security keys. Google is strongly promoting that, and eliminate passwords. Then fake sites. I'm sure you've seen this. So here's a small clip of that. It's for Chase Back, where actually it says chaseonline.hut2.ru. We've seen this every day, right? People putting up fake sites for various things. Try to get your password, and then they can obviously, do so many bad things. Then another thing you should have is offline verification. So don't assume that just because you logged in, something is happening. Phone, SMS, apps, and also dual control, where one person can't do something, 2 people have to do it. I think in corporate sector that is standard, right? I mean, don't want anybody, even the CEO, to do anything on his own. Then let's go to file sharing. So very often when we do e-transaction, we need to share files with other people. Now within the office, we do it on our own server. It's quite common. What happens when people are at home? Oh, we need to share the files, but they're not in the office. What happens if you need to share files with outside people? Oh, no problem. Let's use Dropbox. But then once you use Dropbox, we have a problem. Okay, what is the security of that? What happens if the file which you uploaded is not the file which the other person downloaded? It's changed somehow in the middle. And Dropbox says, well, we don't know. Right? And then, of course, we can use commercial crowdsourcing. I've given Office 365 as an example, but there are many others which will give better security. Then, okay, sorry, I'm seeing only half the picture. Work from home. So many problems, right? What devices are being used? Who manages them? What are the vulnerabilities? Malware, spyware, and who uses things at home, right? I have my employee at home, but the person on the computer right now may be her daughter. Or in fact, even worse, maybe her neighbor who came in there because their computer doesn't work or their internet doesn't work and they want to do something. So now on my computer where people are doing official business work, there's an unknown person using it. So in conclusion, moving processes to digital exposes you to many risks. Sorry, one word is missing there. But the rewards are substantial. I think as Sri Lanka, we've realized, especially in the last month, that the things we were forced to do, are actually things which are good for us. So we should continue to do that. But how do we avoid and mitigate the risks? Thank you.
Thank you, Gehan. I think you touched upon a concern that most of us have because we are forced to get into this arrangement of working from home, and there are many concerns around it. I'm sure there'll be many questions, so we'll take up those questions during the Q&A session. So next, I would like to, I told you at the beginning, so we have 3 speakers from financial institutions that will share with us the options available today to basically discuss, to facilitate payments. And because it is a very important area to focus on, I would like to invite next another representative from the financial sector to speak about how his organization is facilitating digital payments. I would like to invite Conrad Das, Chief Executive Officer of LOLC Finance, to share with us what steps are being taken.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I think that I'm audible. Thank you very much, Subhashini, and thank you very much for Ceylon Chamber for inviting me today. Am I audible to everyone?
Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
We can hear you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. And I think there are so many speakers on the financial services sector, but our difference is actually I'm from LOSC. LOSC is basically concentrating on the deep rural areas of microfinancing and financing the people who are in the deep rural area. So our focus is in that and how we have enabled them, as well as we have certain corporate solutions also. I think Channa's presentation, he talked about that our economy, the people are in rural areas, 80% of our people. So, and our customers, if you take LOLC customers, are mostly in the rural areas. So I think we saw during this period of April, May, we saw a huge take up in the digital payments. Our platform is called an iPay, which is a platform we call it a platform beyond payment. And Tilak touched upon it. Payment is only a one transaction or a one part of the whole transaction. So we enable the entire transactions end to end through our platform. Our concentration is mainly to give a solution to the vendors and not only the customers. Customers, of course, there have been many banking applications which are available. Almost all the banks have a mobile banking application today. They can make their bill payment, they can make their payment or bank transfers to another person. But seamlessly doing it with a merchant or a transaction with an unknown party or a non-trusted party is something which is very important. So that is what the gap which we have closed with the payment app which we are introducing. I think most of the banks today are in that era. And one of the other things that we have introduced is, especially for the corporates, is an entire corporate solution, which is today with the digital adoption and the digital solutions. I think you need to increase the efficiency of your organizations also. So we have a platform similar to the iPay platform. It's actually part of the iPay solution that we enable a single account for all your collections for an organization, whether it's any organization which is having a monthly billing cycle. I'm sure Tilak also has a similar solution. I think we enable that. So that's an efficiency that the organization, the corporates needs today, whether it's a small and medium scale business or a large corporate. So our concentration mainly on the rural areas. So I think what the people have to look at it in terms of the organization is also need to look at is how they can increase the efficiency of the organization using the digital platforms. So we have enabled smaller companies even to have their sales through the platform through a marketplace. So that helped in this COVID situation. I think everyone has got into a app and selling products on the internet.
Somebody has to mute the speaker, no? Go ahead.
Okay. So, what is important today for a corporate, as I mentioned, is to get into this efficiency and adoption of technology. As Tilak mentioned at the end, I think that we have come to the tipping point of digital adoption, probably due to the COVID. I think as the statistic shows, and even in our platform, we see that there is an unprecedented growth of 200% within the month of May and month of April. So that means the people are trusting the platform and people are using the platform, whether it's forced or now it has become their only choice. And as organizations, if we push ourselves to our customers, if we push ourselves to our customers, to adopt the technology and the payments through the digital means, I'm sure, as Chana mentioned, we can contribute to the GDP by saving the physical use of money. So that is something that we need to do. And we are not only in Sri Lanka, we are using the same platform in other countries. We see a huge adoption in the other countries, basically, especially in Cambodia and Myanmar. We see that's a bit of a younger population and their adoption rate is much more higher compared with Sri Lanka. But I think with this kind of knowledge sharing and things which are happening during this period, I'm sure we'll be able to achieve that and we will be able to enable the digital payment and digital payments to the organizations. Thank you. And I'm happy to answer any questions on.
Thank you very much, Conrad. So that is very useful, especially the SME sector is like the foundation of Sri Lankan economy, with many economic activities dependent on SME sector. So facilitating effective functioning of the SME sector becomes very important. Next, I would like to actually invite a different speaker to actually share with us the private sector perspective, especially the user perspective of these digital facilities available to the business sector, especially the importers and exporters who play a vital role in Sri Lankan economy. So next, I would like to invite Dinesh De Silva, who is a member of the National Trade Facilitation Committee, a committee set up to actually improve the functioning of the board agencies, and among which one of the key projects had been establishment of a single window connecting all these border agencies to be able to provide an efficient and effective services to the private sector. I think we've been talking about connecting board agencies electronically for quite some time, and I can't think of any better person than Dinesh to talk about benefits to trade, current gaps, and how digital systems can help reduce unethical practices. So Dinesh, over to you.
Thank you, Subhashini. I guess I can be heard by everyone.
Yes, you can.
Good morning and thank you very much to Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. Like the previous speaker said, this is the best time that we have got to talk about.
Tilak KG.
Can everyone mute their mics, please?
Yeah, there are.
Okay, so I think we can see how technology is giving us disturbances as well while we are trying to absorb or embrace the technology to the maximum. So I think COVID-19 has actually taught us good lessons. While some results are very desperate, but of course when it comes to businesses, we all have to now think doing things differently. And especially we have a habit of visiting places, especially the private sector. It is at different levels. People are quite used to visit places and get things done. So I think with all these facilities, what the previous speakers mentioned, we must pay some close attention to understand how these things work, because it is easier said than being done. We have to have little bit of knowledge about it, especially the security side of it, and the required infrastructure, whether it is a mobile, although we have mobiles, and there could be bandwidth problems, the capacities, etc., and keeping those records safely will be paramount important. And now looking at all those things, now with the given situation, we have to think of not visiting places, and that is resulting in absolute time saving and cost saving. So I think we have a private sector, especially trade. Now when we are talking about e-signatures and paperless, it goes beyond trade. The normal person who is living in outstation also should be able to do things electronically. So that has to start with, I strongly believe, the public sector, the divisional secretariats, the grammar sevakers, the police, and these simple things have to get into a electronic platform. Now, what happens, and I think the government, the policymakers also seriously should look at this. Every government document should be electronically signed, and they must show it by lead by example, and respond to trade matters in electronic form, except for issuing letters on a very critical matter. All the rest of the things should happen on an electronic platform. The biggest problems, although we have, we are in the Trade Facilities Committee, we have a good secretariat led by Department of Commerce and Sri Lanka Customs, but still we find a lot of board agencies, especially when it comes to international trade, lot of board agencies are far below than expected. So I think Sri Lanka Customs and Ports Authority, SLSI, then you come to immigration, then RMB. There are certain leading agencies who are very well ahead of rest of the others. But the fact is, we, in all organizations, there are lots of more things to do to arrive at a particular decent level of operating electronically. So we come across a lot of areas where when the trade applies or write to an institution, the results or the answers are not coming by mail. Then the trade cannot wait indefinitely for answers. So I think in an electronic mode, every responsible organization should have prioritized people, set of resources to look at what they receive electronically and to respond fast. There are no, unfortunately, a lot of organizations are using their private devices, private mobiles, then private emails. It's quite uncomfortable when we write to a government institution that you write to a private Hotmail or Gmail or Yahoo. So technically they should have proper email addresses so that the trade gets confidence back that you are writing officially to a party that will be addressed by them. And also there should be KPIs, and then there should be a mechanism to see what has been received electronically has been responded on time. So I think from private sector, we also have to take a lot of responsibility in identifying and understanding and get onto these electronic platforms than we did earlier, because the future of this country is going to rely on electronic transactions. So within the next round, I will add the rest of the matters. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dinesh. Yes, compared to most of our competing the countries that compete with us in international market, we are lagging far behind, and that definitely the transaction cost in terms of time and money you spend undermines the competitiveness of Sri Lankan exporters. We have our final speaker who have been waiting patiently for a long time. So again, to discuss, to share with us more information about the availability of digital payment facilities. So I would like to invite Rohan Buljans, Chief Technology and Digital Officer Hatton National Bank to share with us what HNB has done to facilitate digital payments. Over to you, Rohan.
Hi, thanks. First of all, thank you, Subhashini, and thanks for the Ceylon Chamber for organizing this. I think I really appreciate that. The first thing that I would like to highlight is, I think everyone has highlighted this, is that the opportunity has arisen, and I think we should not let it move away, because you will never get such an opportunity back again to fast track a lot of things from the challenges that you earlier had from a point of view from adoption to trust to security, because the current situation has basically enabled us to look at and reinvent ourselves, and sometimes also look at in certain areas and leapfrog in certain technologies, and also in certain certain functions that would really help not only the organizations but the merchants plus the customer. So going from a bank standpoint, if you ask, okay, so what is HNB doing about digital payments and how they are going about it? So first of all, looking at the existing context of what has happened today is we are seeing a couple of challenges in the payment process, and what those challenges are the disconnection between how customers order, how the delivery happens, and how the payments happen. So there has been this disconnect that has happened, which has caused some level of inconvenience, but some of the customer, or most of the customers, have ignored it because of the current situation. So that's one of the key issues that we see in the disconnection of all these systems. And you had the other main point that we have observed is the customer's frustration of knowing when they are, once they place an order, and when do they have got to pay. So because there is a complete disconnect. Sometimes you order, sometimes you have to wait for 2 days, and then you get a call saying, okay, you have to pay for it now, or you have to pay for it when you get delivered. So all these challenges are what we are looking at from a business standpoint, how to resolve them. So what we are looking at is, if you look at a future state, we are looking at it from a point of view is how. So if you look at it from our point of view, what we are looking at is, from a customer and from a merchant standpoint, is how do you bring convenience to their point of living? Right. So that's what the main objective of what we're trying to drive. And within that, how do we bring that payment experience to a new level? Now, I know like Channa with Lanka Pay, they're giving us a lot of features, facilities that are enabling us. So how we can use them and how we can drive that payment experience to a new level is our main key objective currently. So that is driving our inertia internally to build payment platforms that are, that will future-proof and enable to achieve those sort of goals. So one of the things that we are looking at is how do we bring these three platforms together, which is the ordering, the delivery, and the payment process together, and how does that ecosystem can coexist. So that is a key component that we are looking at. And also we're looking at is the other challenge is the adoption aspect, is how do we acquire these customers and how do we acquire these merchants in a seamless way. And I think that's where the discussion today, I think, highlights about the availability of digital signatures and the availability of the electronic means of onboarding these merchants and customers seamlessly. So that's another area that we are really focusing on, trying to see how we can bring a merchant on board seamlessly. Because if you look at the micro merchants who play a big role in our economy, if we can enable them to be cashless merchant using whatever payment platform, then there could be a big impact on our GDP, plus the efficiency of how the supply chains will work and how the customers will, also achieve their end objectives. So these are some of the areas that we're looking at, and we're trying to build functionality around these core concepts. So if you have any questions, I can take it up later, or we can just.
Thank you very much, Rohan. That is very informative. So now we will open the forum for questions and answers. And I think there have been many questions already posted, and we will try to answer as many as possible within the given time. I think maybe Channa, you can take the first few questions. I think there were quite a lot of questions about the safety and security of the apps, especially space. I know have answered the question. Maybe verbally tell everyone as well.
Yes. Yeah. So there were several questions in terms of the one was the actually validity of signatures and whether the signature, physical signature scanned and cut and paste in a document is the same thing. It is not the same thing. Digital signature cannot be altered. And if you alter or if you make a change, once you digitally sign a document, the signature gets invalidated. So the safeguards are built into when you create a digital signature as opposed to what we call the electronic signature. So electronic signature can be a physical signature scanned in a document and produced as a digital image. So there are enough safeguards in electronic signature to see whether the signature or the document has been altered. And there were so many other questions, such as for example, in these mobile apps, there are third-party operated apps. Actually, the data of the consumers are stored with the acquiring bank. That is a rule by the central bank, because obviously the banks already have consumer information anyway. So that is where the information is stored. So if you trust your bank or if you trust the banking system, that is where the information is stored, because everybody's already doing that anyway. And in terms of the infrastructure of the backend, the network, what we call the PCI DSS, Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard Certified, in terms of not just the data security, the physical access, all those are in place. Especially the Lanka sign, the digital certificate process is ISO 27001 2013 process certified, which is actually the PCI DSS is audited quarterly, and annual audit is also subject to annual audit, and ISO is annual audit for and annually audited. So all those processes are in place and also audited by central bank, the payments and settlements as well as the bank supervision division. They audit all the systems of the backend as well as the banking system. So in terms of those are in place. Yeah, I think that I'll give the others the rest of the questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There were a lot of questions around legal framework. Actually, whether can you mute the mic? Yeah, so I think there were a lot of about the legal and acceptance code, and also around section. Jayanta, I have all the questions. To read them out. Are you able to answer once that one of us? Jayanta, are you?
Yeah.
So I can read out.
No. There is a heavy echo.
Yes, I think someone switched off the speaker, so can hear the echo from
Yeah, can you simply mute everybody?
So Jayanta, you can go ahead.
Can we have everybody mute their mics, please? It will be very helpful. Otherwise, there will be an echo. Can I be heard?
Yes,
Yeah,
Dan.
you are fine now, Jan.
Yeah, now that's fine. So basically, I'm trying to get all these various questions downloaded clearly.
I can quickly read them out if you feel.
Yeah. So basically, I got a few here. Basically, around interpretation of Section 4
Yes.
and using Section 4 in the electronic context to give validity to the customs related documentation and how legally acceptable they are. That's number one. Second was something about a company adopting a SaaS model, that is a cloud-based regime, and whether that model accompanied by electronic digital signature, whether the courts will accept that, and whether that will be retrievable. So basically, I mean, the questions are quite variable and around a set of key messages that I think are coming out. And also, I'm just trying to understand the last bit that has come, whether execution of deeds and all those transactions can be done electronically. So let me start with that point first, about execution of notarially certified documentation. One point to note in the electronic transactions law. This electronic transactions law is all about facilitating trade, commerce, business, electronic government, electronic contract kind of activities. Due to the inherent additional physical kind of verification required in the context of a deed of transfer for a land, in the case, then if you look at power of attorneys, last wills, so instruments of that nature where some notarial verification, notarial signing, and then depositing that instrument with the Registrar General is required, that cycle of activity has been excluded from the ambit of Electronic Transactions Act for the moment. So Section 23, which I omitted to mention in my very brief introduction, Section 23 of the law is very clear, where it says that those category of instruments, deeds of transfer, deeds of last wills, power of attorneys, and trusts, except for implied trusts, etc., are excluded from the ambit of electronic transactions law, which means that the traditional notarial execution and then depositing those instruments under the registration of documents ordinance with the Registrar General in the Land Secretariat, Land Registry, etc., remains. However, what I want to emphasize is that if we look at the digital transactions, electronic transactions as the new normal, especially in the context of COVID, and move to the next generation, as all the speakers like Conrad, Dinesh, all these people, all of them articulated the importance of moving digital in this current context. If we are moving that direction, well, there could be an amendment to the law possible. And if the use of digital signing methods, which are internationally benchmarked, like LankaSign, are widely used, and people get accustomed to using these technologies, including notaries, and people in the legal community get used to these technologies, then we might see a era where digital notarization is also possible. So I think we need to move on in the ecosystem and graduate to the next generation as a country, and this is a very good opportunity to do that. Now, coming back to questions about Section 4, well, what Sections 4 and other related sections simply say is that wherever there is a writing, where there is a physical norm required in government in relation to a law imposed by statute, statutory framework, that obligation can be met electronically. That's what the law says. So in answer to those questions, whether using a document in a cloud environment authenticated by a digital signature, whether it will be interpreted as legally valid, yes, it will be legally valid. And I have to emphasize that in terms of legal validation, we have a very innovative section here, section 21 of the Electronic Transactions Act, which governs rules relating to electronic evidence admissibility, which says that the information contained in a data message, electronic document, electronic record, and the electronic signature attached to it will have legal validity unless otherwise disproved. So what is important to remember is that by default, if we use an electronic document, electronic record in the context of an electronic transaction and use this Electronic Transactions Act to admit that record in a court of law, by default, it is admissible unless otherwise it is proven by the other side. So the burden shifts to the defendant basically to disprove it on substantial merit. So this is a very important point to remember, and that's why I say it is important to go into the usage of digital transactions within the framework of Electronic Transactions Act, because the benefit in terms of admissibility of these records in court is also useful to remember, because it is less cumbersome than proving a manual document in a court of law. And finally, if they are digitally signing, as Channa said, the digital signing methodology has been audited. The audit trail is available, and then that becomes a part of a business process. And anything emanating from a business process is easier to convince in a court of law. Like in that case I mentioned in the Court of Appeal in June 2018, where they held that when a TIN number is issued from a process-driven mechanism by the tax authorities, there is no need for another physical document to accompany that electronically generated TIN number. So these are the examples I would like to cite as responses to a wide range of questions. And if there are any more, I would like to take them later. Thank you.
Thank you, Jayant. I think there was few questions directed at the financial institutions also. What are the solutions available with banks for customers to open SD account without signing any physical documents? Also, maybe partly to Jayant, partly maybe banks can also answer whether what are the safeguards available in terms of communications exchanged between banks via unauthenticated SWIFT messages. So I would like to open the floor. Any one of the financial institution representatives here can take on those questions, or any additional ones that were specifically directed at you. Conrad or Tilak, would you like to answer any of those questions?
Yes, okay. I'll touch on. As someone had asked about digital KYC. I think Central Bank of Sri Lanka had some concerns of us doing that. In fact, we had done it in the past, but Central Bank intervened and stopped some of those initiatives, because at the time Sri Lanka was on the grey list of anti-money laundering. But good news is that a few days ago it was announced formally that we are out of that list. So probably Central Bank now will streamline that process. In fact, Central Bank recently announced they gave some banks sort of chance to do digital onboarding during the month of March, April, during the COVID-19 lockdown time. So I'm very hopeful, and I'm hopeful that Central Bank will continue to do that. So that way, like customers will be able to digitally onboard themselves to a bank to open a bank account. But I think most banks, even with that limitation, including my bank, we have enabled people to open second account and the FDs and so on through the mobile app once you do your first KYC. So Hopefully this KYC will get sorted very soon. And also central bank had launched eKYC project, basically link all the banks and share KYC as well. I am hopeful that that will also, I think, see some kind of, I think, progress pretty soon. I think there's one more important thing which probably we all should be aware and we should address. I think most of these things what we spoke here, signatures, identity, and things like that, we are trying to authenticate a person and his authenticity. I think their starting point in Sri Lanka is the NIC or the National ID card, which comes from Department of Persons Registration. I think that element is not yet, I think, digitalized and linked with the rest of the things. I think if we get that sorted, I think most of the things that we're talking about will get sorted out. So there are government agencies also must that play that role. I think bankers have taken, I think, maybe halfway down the road trying to, automate and provide these custom experiences. But I think where the real problem is actually in those state agencies, they should be sorted. But I believe ICTA is trying to do some work now. Probably they will also accelerate. I think that sorts out the the authenticity and so on. But I like to give you a bit of slightly different view. So payment is actually one aspect of this whole experience we are talking about. If you want to digitalize a country or a society or provide a seamless experience, we have to build platforms. Platforms is nothing but, for an example, the UPI app I was talking about, which my bank is operating. So we have gone to, for an example, provide health services. You can actually book a doctor through the app. So by doing that, we moved away from banking to an experience. Similarly, you can do movie tickets booking and so on. So the banks actually can go from traditional bank to experiences and give you better services. So in the process, we can link all the ecosystem, be it a delivery service Rohan mentioned, and be it any other thing which is actually a roadblock or showstopper now. So by doing that, I think we can digitalize whole of Sri Lanka within a very shorter period of time. See, I'm very optimistic because I have seen these elements everywhere. Like, there is a delivery system, for an example, Pick Me is operating there. And only thing is we have not linked them and to provide a seamless operation. I think that can be done within a very short period of time. So if you get all this ready, connected, which are ready by the way, and if you get connected, I think Sri Lanka can fast track a lot of things within next couple of months, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Tilak. Are there is there anything else Rohan or Conrad would like to add?
I think Tilak covered it very well. So I think I agree with him that banks should start moving to experiences rather than giving the customer just getting his account balance and just doing a transfer of a fund. So experience will be the key in bringing this adoption rate much higher.
Thank you very much. I think there were a few more questions, Channa, which I think you can take up. Especially one of the concerns that normally comes up is in the minds of the customer is what are the additional fees and payments one has to pay for these electronic facilities or electronic transactions. And when you look at this, I feel it may be very well. You can touch on it.
Yeah, in terms of the electronic payments, already customers are using the internet banking and sending payment to other banks. There's already established fee structure that is there, which is charged by the banks. But in terms of all these digital transactions using mobile, almost all, if not all, they are not charging anything from the customers. So in that sense, I think that's also one of the reasons why we have probably seen very good adoption. Whatever that is charged is primarily from the merchant, which is like normally a card-based system. But that also it's a very low percentage from the merchant. So I think in a previous popularizing card-based payments in the country has also resulted because many small-time merchants were not willing to give 2 to 3% of their profit tax commission because especially the small timers, if their profit from a good day maybe even 5%. So because of that, most of the small timers refuse card payments from customers. We have come across many instances of this. So to overcome that, actually, what we have really done is with these systems, we have drastically reduced the merchant commission. In most cases, it's like 0.5% or even less from a transaction value. So which means which is a significant reduction compared to what they're expecting compared to some of the other payment modes that are already there. I think these two aspects have sort of really helped in terms of adoption of customers and merchants. But I think the fundamental problem has been the availability of cash in the country. I think that is why we have seen a huge struggle of moving people to digital. Because if you really look at, as I mentioned initially, 23 million debit cards, when you walk out of the home, not these days, previously, that you would run into either bank or ATM every corner. So taking out cash has never been a problem, unlike in these days of COVID, pandemic. So because of that, using cash has not really been a huge problem for customers as well as merchants. I mean, we talk about not having change and all that is there, but I think it has never really been a deterrent. But if you compare a country like some countries in Africa, their mobile payment, especially the mobile money systems, have been very popular and a lot of adoption. Primary reason is you don't get banks in those countries. Branches are very hard to find. So you have to say probably sometimes go 500 miles to get to the next bank. So people did not have a choice of using cash. I mean, they didn't also have ATM machines all over the place. So they had no choice but to adopt mobile money type of system. But in Sri Lanka, since we have cash very prevalent, this has been one of the deterrents for adoption of electronic payments. I mean, in my opinion. And I think because of COVID, since people couldn't go out of the house and they couldn't go to ATM or their bank, I think people started using. So one of the good things about electronic is once you start using electronic, generally people tend to continue. Getting them started has been the issue, but once they start, at least they will start, continue to use the electronic. So I think COVID has done in that sense good, because they have got people, even the elderly people, I mean our parents, to start using electronically, either making payments or sending documents, sending email, whatever. All those can be done, are done electronically because of right now the issues. But I think this will give a boost to the adoption.
Thank you.
Thank you, Achana.
Professor,
are there any
questions around safety and security guys where you had already answered them on the chat? But is there anything you would like to elaborate as well?
Okay, I seem to have a lot of echo. Or somebody switch it off, right? Right. Hopefully people can hear. Okay. Whoever is having this thing on, please switch it off. Please mute your mic, please. Right. Okay, it's still there. Right. Anyway, it says what's the difference between electronic signature and a digital signature? So let me try to explain that. Of course.
Can you all please, if you're not speaking, switch off your mic? I think it is very difficult for us to function without. Maybe, Gehan, now it's okay. Would you like to try again? Gehan? Hello?
So, Subhashini, until Gihan comes into the scene, can I answer two questions that which I just managed to retrieve?
Yes, go ahead.
That just came to me. So there are two. Actually, one is a rather interesting practical question which I thought needs to be addressed. This is regarding notarial documents. Can we facilitate in the presence or via a Zoom meeting so that the document will be a vetting document but not electronic? Considering the current situation, the Zoom meeting will be recorded and documents photographed before and after signing from the screen. well, the person who raised the question understands the fact that this is not addressed within the framework of the Electronic Transactions Act. But I have encountered these issues time and time again in the context of the COVID crisis. So I would simply respond this way. If you have a client base and you trust the client base or had interaction with that client, then I would presume it will be all right to, rather than physically meeting, conduct all your transactions, including making an observation that the signing happened on the Zoom. And the important factor in that situation is that the Zoom session is recorded. Now, in the event of a problem, what is useful here, even better than in the context of a manual process where you have a physical meeting in the lawyer's room and nothing is recorded as such, and all these people come together in a lawyer's chamber and then sign this documentation and go. In this scenario that is posed by the lady or gentleman who posed a question, in a Zoom session, when that entire activity is recorded, it is possible to have that as a contemporaneous recording to be admitted under the Evidence Special Provisions Act of Sri Lanka. So if there's a problem, you have some kind of a contemporaneous record. So that's an advantage in the context of a non-physical based Zoom environment or digital environment, where even notarization happens some kind of in a distance manner. But I think the primary consideration is that it's important for parties to have some element of trust or prior understanding. If it is an unknown party, you need to be careful because you may be examining documents which are not very clear. So those aspects needs to be considered. So that's the first one. Second one was, Mr. Jayanta, if the legal framework is there to facilitate digital signature and digital certificates, why do we still have physical KYC requirements in banks? And I think Tilak answered this somewhat, but I want to add to what Tilak said. The identification process is governed by the identification laws in the country, which has been upgraded from time to time. And the most recent update, which started in 2012, culminated through a process in 2016 in Parliament and a regulation in 2017. We saw a regime for the ID card department or the Department of Registration of Persons to have the ability under the new section 39B to provide verification services. So in other words, with the consent of the ID card holder, a bank, a telco, a company, corporation, or any other government institution could verify the ID card details, and to make it happen digitally, there was a regulation drafted under the Electronic Transactions Act, and that was gazetted. The eKYC gazette notification was promulgated on the 21st of March 2019. However, we must be mindful of the fact that, as Tilak said, Sri Lanka went through a grey listing scenario, and the FIU imposed a certain requirements of physical verification, within quotes unquotes, under the Financial Transactions Reporting Law. And now, in this context, the central bank has been quite broad-minded and issued new guidelines for digital onboarding. And in that context, what I want to note is that the Section 2 of the Financial Transactions Reporting Act is very clear. There is no obligation for physical verification imposed under that law, even under the customer due diligence regulations. What has to be done is for that entity to take appropriate measures to absorb the risk and verify. So, having said that, the ID card department is now in the process of doing a server upgrade and digital transformation. Hopefully, they will get their act together and do it fast to do end-to-end verification of ID card holder details And once that happens, eKYC will be possible. So it is nothing to do with Electronic Transactions Act. It is to do with two other laws that I mentioned a short while ago. Thank you.
I think Gihan is back. Gihan, would you like to take the floor and answer some of the questions?
Right. I'm not sure at what point you didn't see me. So I will start from the beginning again. So the first question I tried to answer was the difference between an electronic signature and a digital signature. So in the case, electronic signature can be of one of two types. Either you can scan your physical signature and then paste it on documents, which simply means, okay, there's a nice picture on the document. It doesn't really mean anything else, but it does indicate that you intended, or at least if you claim you signed it, then of course that can be said as signed. The other one is a signature you put on a device like a tablet or a phone with your finger or with some kind of stylus. Again, it simply says there is some intent to sign there. Of course, it's very similar to a paper signature where all you see is, something signed with a pen on a piece of paper. It doesn't really say that you signed it. It means something was signed there. A digital signature, on the other hand, is created digitally using a certain secret. That secret may be stored on the computer or in your brain or on a device or maybe it's accessed using your fingerprint, something like that. So it has more validity, not perfect validity, but some validity, and also it also ensures that the document is not changed. So those are the two basic things I wanted to mention. Then there's a couple of questions on, one is corporates who need seamless payment processors integrated with the ERP. Yes, so I think there are almost all the ERP people, the vendors, have a solution for that. And then the proof to be given in a court of law. Yes, so if you just say electronic document, here it is, then the court will ask, can you give its provenance? Can you prove that it has not been changed? It was done. So digital signature is one way you can do that. Also, using a platform provided by a vendor who has a proper platform and stores things securely, that would also help you. So I would suggest if you try to do it yourself, fine, but it would be much better to use a platform which provides all these backup facilities, archiving, databases, and so on and so on, which of course you have to pay them some money, but then that's what you get back from them. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Gihan. I think there were some questions simply. I think there is a worry about how easy is it to forge a digital or electronic signature versus how easy is it to forge a handwritten signature. So normally because we are so used to using manual systems, sometimes we seem to think that they are safer and the probability of misuse and abuse is lower. But in reality, even the manual paper-based systems can easily be misused and abused, and I think handwritten signatures can be abused as well. So maybe it's an interesting psychological shift that one has to make, that both have similar risks maybe. I'm wondering whether you see a greater risk of one over the other, but I think misuse and abuse is a concern that comes out frequently. Would you like to give your view on the matter, Gihan?
Yes, thank you, Subhashini. Yes, so the first thing is handwritten signatures. So we all know that checks have been forged, deeds have been forged, everything you can think of has been forged. So even if, 500 years ago, people were forging documents. So it's nothing new. Right. Now, what about electronic signatures? Yes, forging an electronic signature, as I said, a picture of someone's signature is pretty trivial, right? You can do it in 1 minute. So I wouldn't place much reliance on that. However, a digital signature can also be forged. However, it needs a certain amount of technical knowledge, and there is a certain thing. So it depends on how. I mean, I'm not going to go into a detailed description of different types of placing a digital signature, but if you do it properly, you can show that the risk of forgery becomes much less. If you don't do it properly, then it can be just as easy to forge as anything else. In fact, the detection is because the examiner of question documents would probably not be able to say, well, you know, this is something bad. He says, yes, it has been properly signed using that whatever thing, but it's still a forgery. So we will get into that type of things. So yes, handwritten signatures can be forged, but in general, if you follow proper procedures, digital signatures are, I would say, less likely to be forged.
Thank you, Gihan. So I would like to now turn to Dinesh. Dinesh, there were some questions about how easy is it to do transactions electronically with customs, and also about import cargo, certain documents having to have, whether it's important to make this input of reference numbers mandatory, because when making payments, this has become problematic. Would you like to take on some of the questions that were directed related to international trade, Dinesh, and answer?
Yes. I would say I will not try to individually answer the questions, but I will try to combine them and then give some general answers, because people who are in the trade would have noticed in the recent past how suddenly, especially starting from the terminals and shipping lines, introduced e-submissions, electronic information exchange, and certain documents were shared electronically, which actually customs was very flexible in those areas where they were accepting all those kind of e-documents. In fact, before COVID, it was a different kind of a operation, but of course, with the blessings of the COVID-19, the trade has got the opportunity of at least submitting a whole lot of shipping documents electronically to customs. So customs have their own share of problems because, like I previously said, there may be private instruments like phones and messages are flooding in, and then the private mails are being functioned. All that put together, I think a lot of work has to be done going forward to establish these procedures. So with the given limitation, I think everyone was trying to accommodate, but still the long delays, no responses, images not being clear, all that has led to the wharf clerks or the private sector go to these places and see physically what's going on. So I think it will take a little bit of time for this transformation. And actually, it has to start from the private sector, very specially, to discipline ourselves and take that challenge on and keep on operating electronically, so that will be the good start going forward. Because very importantly, we have to get used to e-signatures and paperless documents if we are to fulfill the WTO commitments that the Sri Lanka has given under the trade facility agreement. A big change we are expecting with the national single window. For that, this is a prerequisite to get used to our operations electronically, so that this implementation of national single window will be basically based on electronic transactions. So if we don't do that properly, if we don't get ourselves right, and we expect the public sector, the government, the institutions also to fall in line with this, there will be sort of certain disconnections. We must make use of the opportunity and do it as much as possible. But for some reason, there is resistance from certain institutions to accept electronic documents. So actually, there is a bureaucratic resistance that plays a part in this whole transformation. So I think we have to clearly identify and do the changes. Then very importantly, this drive has to come from the head of state, and it has to come through the I think that message has to be very clear, and this advice should come through the Ministry of Telecommunication and Digital Infrastructure to authorizing electronic records and electronic transactions under the Electronic Transaction Act, which will give a big boost to the Sri Lankan industry and trade and all of us, because without which we will not be able to compete with the other countries regionally, globally, and for us to be competitive, cost savings, and then more than all, the transparency and elimination of corruption, all that is heavily based on these electronic transactions. So without which we will not be able to achieve our ends, and we all know that trade is suffering, and government need the GDP growth to go up. So I think these two, this topic and the discussions that had a very powerful message all the government in the private sector to get on with this stuff and fulfill our requirements. Thank you, Subhashini.
Thank you, Dinesh.
I think.
Subhashini, can I just add something to what Dinesh said?
Yes, sure.
So
Yes, sure.
in terms of what he said, that it has to come from the head of state. Actually, there is already an initiative which has started very recently, that the government departments to start sending and accepting electronic documents digitally signed. So which there is an initiative that is there. I think you will get to hear very soon. It will start from a segment of the government and then propagate to other areas, but it is already in progress of the direction has come to use in certain departments initially, and then as a pilot project and move on. So that is going to happen. The second one is, I think Jayanta can add to what I'm saying in terms of accepting electronic signature. Right now, the signatures that are issued within Sri Lanka is under the Electronic Transactions Act. People are accepting within the country, within the organizations, that can be propagated. But if you look at cross-border, right, and so what you need to establish is, you need to establish a trust between the two parties on either side of the validity of a signature. So that is where the trust for the country certificate is required. So for that, what's called a NCA, National Certificate Authority Task Force, was established, and very recently a root key ceremony was held for the national key, which will be published in most of the international browsers and other applications, where the validity of the Sri Lankan root key will be there internationally. So once that root key is the validity is established, the service providers in Sri Lanka will align under that. So once that is done, even all the certificates that are issued in Sri Lanka will also be valid, cross-border across. So for trade, this is going to be critical, because the trade deal with parties in other countries, especially contracts and other things. So this will the legal validity will come in place of a cross-border signature. I think Jayanta, if you have anything to add on that.
My heard?
There is
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. So hopefully I heard. Yeah. So I thank Dinesh and Channa both for echoing certain. Can everybody mute? Yeah. Am I heard better? No.
Again, I think everybody else has to mute their mics. Jayanta, looks like it's right.
Yeah.
Okay, now try again.
Can I go now? I think it's clear now.
Yes.
So I'll quickly elaborate on this. What I thank Channa and Dinesh both for articulating.
We can't hear you, Jayanta.
Hi, can I be heard? Yeah.
Now.
Yeah. So I just want to echo what Channa and Dinesh said. I thank both of them for articulating a position that some of us have been wishing for a long time. So under the National Certificate Authority Task Force, which we jointly chair with Central Bank, there is an effort we are about to finalize a circular that is long overdue on the digital documentation usage and the use of electronic digital signatures for authenticating documentation in a government environment. So that has been done. We are waiting for the high authorities to approve that. And Channa, myself, and some of us who are in the task force are working and pushing. And I would urge Ceylon Chamber to articulate the position that Dinesh just mentioned about the need for adoption as the new default, and to ensure that the electronic transactions regime becomes the new normal when we get back to our work from this week. So I think Ceylon Chamber has a big role to play in the policy arena, helping us push for these reforms to move faster than what is happening currently. Having said that, Channa's point about cross-border validity of electronic signatures, I want to emphasize the fact that the electronic transactions regime that was upgraded to that gold standard I mentioned at the beginning, the UN Electronic Communications Convention, means that the electronic signature, if it is the digital signature issued through that regulated process through a recognized certificate service provider, would have cross-border validity. And for cross-border validity, there has to be mutual recognition arrangements entered into between governments. So, for example, in some of the free trade agreements, it has been documented, but these have to be brought into proper effect. So, if people are lethargic and slow in this area, it is difficult to ensure that, but the law, as we speak, allows that to happen. Finally, there was a question specifically addressed to me a short while ago, which the question is, where under a particular act, if a certificate is issued as proof of registration in order to make a digital form certificate valid, does it require amendment to that law? The answer is no. The Electronic Transactions Act is very clear. Electronic Transactions Law, the one of 2006, has cross-cutting legal effect. So you don't have to amend all the other laws to ensure that an electronic registration, electronic certificate digitally signed is legally valid. Section 8 of the law says that where there is a manual process, including a manual procurement method used, and issue of licenses, issue of certificate is done under a particular law, you don't have to amend those laws. This law says, notwithstanding anything required, Electronic Transactions Act recognizes the digital equivalent. So with that note, I would push for great adoption of this law as the new normal in the time to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Jayant. I think a few years back also when we were working together, this was a critical question that came about where many government agencies felt that their particular acts required amending hand signatures. So maybe the acts had to be amended, but I think the drafters of the Electronic Transactions Act taken care of that, because it would have, like, if we were to, if that section 8 wasn't there, it would have been an administrative nightmare having to amend all laws. I think it was very wisely done when drafting that law. So I think we have come almost to the end of our program, and it's 12 o'clock. I know this is such a wide topic, and I'm sorry for the participants. Maybe some of your questions did not get the answer, but let's what I look forward to is to continue this conversation. I think this is the time we have to make this transition. So, so I would like to wind up the program by thanking all the panelists and all the speakers for their very informative, valuable inputs. And thank you very much for being here, and for all the participants. And virtual webinars are not the same like having physical presence. It's sad that we couldn't see any of your faces and that we could not entertain verbal questions. But thank you very much for being here, and thank you very much for being quite interactive. And I hope you found this session informative. And I think the chamber will share with you the recording. Maybe Manori or Amanda can say a word about the presentations and the recording where people can access it. So thank you everyone, and I would like to now hand over to Ceylon Chamber.
Thank you, Subhashini. It was actually a very informative session, and we had a huge participation today. Unfortunately, some of you couldn't log in because we exceeded the amount of participants online. However, we will be sharing the recording with everyone who has registered. We will share the link. And we would also like to thank again Subhashini as well as all the panelists who came online today with their time, and all the participants who joined us. And a special note of thanks again to HNB for being our sponsor, and for FITIS for being a partner of this webinar. And we hope to end this session now, but we will be back with more knowledge sharing webinars from the chamber. So please stay tuned, and thank you very much again for joining us. Thank you.